Hey guys, welcome in. So today we are going to be working on your clay lesson number 3 assignment. So first things first, let's get together some of the things that you're going to need to complete today's lesson. So you will need your bag with the pinch pot in it that you made last class. You will also need your slip cup with your slip that you've already begun making from last class. Remember, be careful not to stir it and shake it around. You'll also need your clay, your fresh clay. And it helps if you just have the items that are also included in your clay kit. More specifically, today, your black plastic knife, your paintbrush, and your fork. Additionally, as always, it's helpful to also have a bowl of water. To make things clean and tidy, never hurts to have some paper towels. And if you have a spray bottle, that could also be helpful, but it's not required. So go ahead and get all these things out and then we'll get started. All right, the first thing that we're going to look at is your pinch pot that we had made and stored from last class. So go ahead and very carefully open up your bag and get your pinch pot out. Okay, so this is my pinch pot from last class. Remember, I didn't really smooth mine out as much as you guys did because I was trying to make a nice short demo for you guys. But yours should be all smoothed out on the top, bottom, inside out, everything. Should also be about a 1/4 inch thick. So what we're checking today is we're seeing if our clay storage technique was good enough to keep our clay from drying out at all. So all of ours are going to be different. You know, some of you guys might be able to say, yes, you did a great job and that your clay for your pinch pot is still super fresh and soft and bendable. And if so, then that is awesome because our goal for storing our projects in our bag are that they stay at the same hydration level. That way we can continue on them later. Although we are not necessarily going to be continuing with the pinch pots, this helps give us an idea for how we might need to modify our storage techniques for other projects going forward. So as I'm looking at my pinch pot and I'm kind of feeling it, it's still pretty soft. You can see I can still kind of move around the clay. It budges, it bends without excessive cracking, but it definitely does seem like mine dried up at least a little bit since I made this. Which means that while it was in the bag, something happened which let it dry out just a little bit, and that's common. You guys, as much as we try to keep air from getting into our bags, air will find a way in. So this tells me that if I were to want to continue putting this project in that bag, I should also throw in a little bit of water to help keep it damp. And I should probably refresh that water every couple days to make sure it's not drying up. So at this point, we are going to recycle this clay and we are going to keep it for a later date by adding it back into our clay block. If it's a little on the dry side, you're going to want to make sure you rehydrate this pinch pot with water before returning it back to your block at a later date. Now, if you are absolutely in love with your pinch pot, you do not have to return it to your block. You can simply let it dry out instead if you would prefer. So, since mine is a little bit dry, I'm not just going to add it back into my fresh clay source. I'm actually going to work on rehydrating this clay first. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to return this pinch pot back to the trash bag, and you can either splash in some water from your bowl of water, or as mentioned, if you have a spray bottle, it could help. I did 7 sprays inside of the bag. I'm gonna try to get rid of as much air as possible. Wrap it up really good and let it sit on itself for later. So ideally, next time I check on this pinch pot, it will be super rehydrated and I can recycle it back with my fresh clay. So I'm gonna set this aside and now we are going to be moving on to our next part of today's lesson. Next, you will need your slip that we started making from the other day and a paintbrush. So if you notice, if you look very carefully to the side of your slip, it most likely looks like there's a lot of sediment at the bottom, muddy, messy stuff, and some water above it. Do your best to not shake up your slip cup. We want to keep these very separate if possible. That would be awesome. So what we are going to do is we want to drain out all of this extra water so that we only have the slip mud on the bottom. Now when you pour out the water, I recommend not pouring it down the sink. If there's a little bit of clay that gets in the sink, it's really not going to be the end of the world. However, it's just overall not good for plumbing to have clay in it. So I highly recommend, to respect your parents' house, take your slip cup outside, maybe to a little planter or something, and just pour the little excess water just in a planter. I'm sure they would appreciate that. Just so I don't have to move around, I'm just going to pour my excess water in this bowl. So I'm going to take the lid off very carefully, trying not to shake things up. And then start pouring out the water. Okay, I left a tiny bit of water there, not the end of the world. I think that will actually work out well. Okay, so once you have drained out the water from the top of your slip cup, you should just be left with basically the slip on bottom. You'll take the back end of your paintbrush and you'll just kind of stir it up. So mine's a little on the watery side. If I could have gotten out that last bit of water, I think it would have worked out a little bit better. As you guys can see, mine is very liquidy. Your goal is that your slip should be kind of like pancake batter. So let's see, how can I phrase this? Your slip is too thick if it holds its form quite a lot. Your slip is too thin if it's very watery, just like this is right here. Since my slip is definitely on the thin side, I'm probably gonna let it sit out for a couple hours and just kind of monitor it. Ideally, the goal is that it'll dry up a little bit with time to where it gets a little bit thicker. We really do want this to have a very glue, as I mentioned, pancake batter-like consistency, not super liquidy like this. So because mine's thin, I'm gonna leave it open and set it to the side for a bit. For our last part of today's lesson, we are going to be making two figures. And for lack of better words, they're essentially going to be snowmen. So first thing you will need is your fresh clay storage. And you will also need your black plastic knife. Go ahead and take your clay out of the bag. As always, we first check to see kind of how it's doing. Is it too dry? Is it too damp, which is a rare scenario? Mine is actually really fresh. I've been working hard to hydrate mine, and I can tell that it's exactly how I like it right now, which is really great. So that means when I move forward and I keep storing my clay in that bag, I'll probably add none, if maybe only a little bit of water, because now the clay is exactly to my liking for how damp I want it to be. So I just have to maintain it. I don't need it to soak up more water. All right, so I've got my clay. I'm going to break off, let's see. Can always get more for today. I'm thinking that, a little bit more than that. Yeah, that'll work. So I grabbed about this much for our first part of today's activity. So as always, clay goes back into the bag. If yours is a little on the dry side, be sure to add a bit of water, then close it up with minimal air inside. As always, I'm going to start by kneading and wedging my clay. So notice I'm not just throwing it from hand to hand. Every time I grab it, I squeeze it really hard, and that's kind of helping to knead and wedge it just in my hand. More commonly with bigger pieces, you knead and wedge it on the tabletop, but it's a little hard with tiny pieces like this. So next, you're going to roll it not quite into a coil, but kind of like a thicker coil like this. Then go ahead and cut it into roughly thirds. It does not have to be perfect by any means. We're just trying to divide our chunk of clay into 3 relatively equal parts. As I'm working with my clay, I'm already noticing it starting to get some cracks and whatnot, so I'm just gonna make sure I get a little bit of water on my hands, make sure my hands aren't too dry. Next, we're gonna take each of these 3 pieces and we're gonna roll them into a ball shape. I'm just doing it in my hands. You can do yours on the tabletop, whatever works for you. Okay, I've got one. Should look like kind of a marble. And 2. And 3. So now we have 3 little clay balls. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to attach them together. So as mentioned, this is, metaphorically kind of like making a snowman. If you wanted to arrange them to where the largest size one is on bottom and the smallest is on top, which is standard with an actual snowman, you can do that. However, you don't have to. So I'm going to take the one, and you might notice that it helps when you go to attach clay bits like this. It helps if the surface that they attach to right in there is a little flatter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of those surfaces and just quickly, lightly kind of tap them on the tabletop. And now you will notice that they line up a little bit better. It's more of a flat surface they line up on. You don't want to do too much because then it really flattens out your circles, but this just helps them get better surface area to connect. So I'm just going to kind of squish them together until it feels pretty solid. All right, that feels good. Great. Then I'm going to also add the third one right on top. So again, I'm just going to lightly kind of tap one side a little flat so that way they merge together pretty nicely. And then kind of carefully just kind of squish that down until it seems like it's attached really well. Take your time on this and try to keep these shapes nice and round too. They tend to want to flatten out a little bit. You can refine the shapes as you work. If you want and you got some extra time, you can even kind of, make this little cutesy, put a little snowman face on it, give him a hat and all that fun stuff. But I'm gonna give you guys a little bit more time to get this guy all attached.